In this episode, I have with me Mr. Ashish Dikshit. Ashish is the managing director of Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail Limited, and also good friend. I'm going to use this opportunity to have Ashish share with us his insights, being at the vantage position of having seen not just his company, but the overall Indian business environment evolve over the last 3.5 decades. Welcome, Ashish.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bagri, and thank you for inviting me for this.
It's a pleasure to have you with us today. And why don't we start by you telling us something about ABFRL and your business?
Okay. So, Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail Limited, which is the name of the company that I head, is India's premier fashion company. We've been around for nearly 30 years, which is almost as long as the branded fashion in this country has been. The company is focused on fashion, but very diverse in terms of kind of fashion we offer and the kind of consumers we serve. We have a portfolio of brands which is growing every day, nearly 20 brands in our portfolio. We have two retail concepts, the Collective, which is at the super premium to luxury end, and Pantaloons, which is at the value and the more accessible end of the market. In between, we have a brand for men, women, Western, ethnic, kids. So it's a all-in-all fashion company serving Indian customers' need across usage occasions, consumer segments, geographies.
So, Aditya Birla Fashion today is obviously a long distance from where you started 30 years ago. And I've particularly noticed with keen interest the acquisitions which you have been making. You seem to be on a great shopping trip with Sabyasachi, Tarun Tahiliani, and the others. So, what's the thinking behind it, Ashish?
So if you look at the history of our company, for almost first 10 to 15 years, we were serving as a large part, of course, there were other dimensions, but a large part we were serving men going to work. Over a period of time, I think as the occasions grew, we continued to expand and address their out of work situations, brunch, party, and so on. But for a fairly large period, men were the primary customers. Over the last 15, 20 years, women market has got organized both on the ethnic side and the Western side. We started from the Western side first because that's where our brands had equity, and Van Heusen and Alan Solly almost 20 years back got into that segment. Over a period of time, we realized that Indian women, unlike anywhere else in the world, have not moved and migrated to Western wear, as has happened in most markets where the local ethnic traditional clothing had given way to Western wear. In fact, in India, the reverse seems to be happening over the last 5-7 years, where women are paying buying more expensive clothing from Indian designers, beautiful Indian new brands, small boutiques. And that's a market that we realized is growing rapidly. We felt as a leader in the market for a long period of time, we have ignored this segment. And in some ways, we are catching up to something that we had not done in the previous time. And therefore, while it looks like a series of multiple acquisition, it's very well-crafted strategy around building a play in Indian wear for the company.
I think you folks have been at the vantage point of seeing the evolution of the Indian market and particularly the Indian customer. So, if I would to put you in a corner and say, what have been the key themes which you have observed over the last decade? What would come to your mind?
So I think multiple themes. First of all, there are many more segments of customers. Just as every society or industry matures, you get stratification of the segments. So earlier, I would say the core customer was 25 to 40-year-old, largely male, more urban. Today, clearly, who the consumer is itself has shifted quite a bit. While the core has remained where it is, I think women have become very important part of the segment as they have got into the organized segment. Also, women coming to work has created a new segment of the market. Young men and women 15 years back couldn't afford brands. Today, they're driving fashion like they do everywhere else in the world, but they're also driving premiumness, they're driving aspiration at that end. Interestingly, in fact, at the mature end of the market, which is 45, 50-year-old men and women who are now acting like they're 30 and 40 are actually a big consumption class that has come up. So the first shift in the consumers is there are many more cuts to consumers than existed before. Same is true of geography. At least in our segment, last part of the market was in top 10, 20 cities. Today, the mid-income towns, the smaller towns are also growing very rapidly, and the consumption is rapidly traveling there because influencers are traveling. The digital access has made them both aspire and achieve and get access to a lot more of fashion and I'm sure many other categories. The third thing that I would call out, and I think this has been the theme for India, and I would say for any emerging economy for a long period of time, is the theme of premiumization. Almost every set of customers are actually out there to improve their lives. And in category like fashion, you want to show where you have progressed in life. The fourth thing that I would say consumer was uh, a passive recipient of what marketers, manufacturers, and brand did. Increasingly today, it's not just marketing; it's even shaping the product and giving feedback, and through their choices and through their wallet, forcing a certain kind of products to sort of come up faster, having a view on what companies should do, how they should act, how should they come across, what causes should they support. So there is a huge change in the way we saw consumers, where she lived, how many of them existed, how they behaved, how they shopped, and how they engaged and interacted with the brands.
So, how do you keep track of the consumer, especially the point which you made about consumers having a voice and almost influencing and oftentimes telling you what they want? So, how do you keep track of it, and how do you respond to it?
I would say the first and the most basic and fundamental thing is we are largely a retail direct to consumer business. Close to 75% of our business this year will be a company between 12 to 13,000 crores. 75% of that business would be directly sold by the company to consumer, which means we know how often she comes, who's the customer, what have they bought before. Uh, we run a very large program, which is classically the Net Promoter Score, but of consumer feedback, where every day thousands of footfalls which are happening on the stores, a large percentage of them gives them feedback, gives us feedback, primarily around three things: around a product, a service at stores, or any other things that they wished they came for and we didn't have. Clearly, there's a social media listening which all corporations and brands have set up. Earlier days, brands used to speak a lot more. Now I think they listen a lot more, and that's been the big change. So there's a lot of listening going around and saying what consumers are saying, not just about your brand, but category and other areas of cultural influences, because brands need to respond to that as well. But I think, as I started off saying, consumers are moving at a very rapid pace. It's been hectic, difficult, challenging, but clearly there is only one way, which is brands will have to listen a lot more intently, a lot more closely, and respond that much faster.
Ashish, you also mentioned that 75% of your sales is you selling directly to consumers, and I presume you meant primarily through your retail stores, the physical retail stores,
Both the retail stores as well as in e-commerce.
as well as in e-commerce. Okay. So that's kind of a good segue for telling us something about what do you think about the different new business models, especially in the world of fashion, which have mushroomed up, and how do you see yourself amidst these in terms of where you came from, and how do you see yourself today? How do you see yourself 5 years later? I kind of clubbed a lot of it together so that you could just give us your views on what's happening.
So I think first and foremost, I would start by saying that unlike many other parts of the world, and particularly more developed economies, retail in India continues to remain terribly underpenetrated, uh, barely developed to 30 to 40% level in most evolved category, and even lesser in many other categories. So first and foremost, I think the traditional retail itself has a long way to grow. And I mean modern retail, which is going to be more customer friendly, more organized, more consistent, trustworthy, reliable in its service, product offering, and so on. That itself is going to grow in a country like India, where the number of cities which are going to come in consumption class every decade is so large that I think just physical retail will take 5, 10, 15 years to come to any level of maturity. And I think that's the first and the foremost. A lot of people in today's world, because there are so many business models, disruptive ideas which are coming, forget the idea that the core penetration itself has a long way to run. Having said that, I think the e-commerce has traveled. More and more people, with the advent of cheap mobile telephony, I think 5G will further accelerate that. Both content and commerce is taking itself to many more places geographically than it used to be before. Now that has created and the growth of e-commerce with the large platforms coming in, whether it's Amazon, the Walmart Group, Flipkart, Myntra, Reliance is building a large. Many other big corporate houses are building large business around that. Now these are like new highways being built to consumer homes, which are smoother, travel deeper, and faster. And that's allowed brands and manufacturers to reach consumers very differently and much faster. In terms of, therefore, new business models, earlier the barriers to entry were much larger. And you had to put up one store, 5 stores, 20 stores. It would take you 2, 3, 4 years to figure out how to make that work. Today, if you have a beautiful idea and you find just a bare enough set of customers who like that idea, the virality of good products and good ideas takes you. So the non-linear growth is possible. E-commerce has taken away some of the traditional advantage that capital had, which you had the money to open stores, others didn't have. I think today ideas travel much faster. Better ideas travel even faster in that sense. So the core has come down to consumer really driving and seeking good propositions, and therefore digital first brands are able to scale a lot more rapidly, the ones which are actually able to create a meaningful proposition differently. That's creating a whole bunch of ideas. Today, whether it is a D2C in its most basic form, or tomorrow subscription, there are ideas of rentals which are coming at clothing in rentals, subscription models where every 4 months or 3 months or a month, you will keep getting a bunch of clothes. The level of personalization which digital is offering allows brands to understand consumers, target them with more specific offering. So there's a whole bunch of ideas which have got opened up because of that. But I think on both sides, on traditional brick and mortar retail, as well as pure digital, there is a lot of new ideas which are coming up. The most interesting one, however, and the largest influence is these two merging together. Today, if you look at last 5 years, most large e-commerce companies are buying physical store companies and physical brands. Similarly, a lot of physical retailers, brick and mortar retailers, are hiring resources, buying technology, and implementing multiple technology systems to actually make consumer journey more meaningful. Sometimes she starts on web and lands up in stores. Sometimes she never goes to stores. Sometimes she goes to store but wants it delivered. I think building an immersive technology which gives consumer a seamless experience, both of discovery and fulfillment, is where a lot of new models are coming up.
Very interesting. And since you basically veered towards the digital space, where do you see yourselves in your digital journey? The reason, let me put in a bit of preamble to that. The reason I ask is we spend a lot of time guiding organizations through their digital transformation journeys. And we typically look at it in terms of what stage of the transformation are they in. Obviously, all organizations are moving digital, but there's a distance between adopting digital, becoming digital, and being digital at the core. So where would you see yourself in this journey, and why do you say so?
So I think very fair point. Most organizations are struggling to figure out where they stand. In my own assessment, I think we have made some distance, but we are pretty much somewhere middling as far as that journey is concerned. And that perhaps is the reality of most organizations, because core of your business is embedded in systems which are designed for a different environment. And I think where digital is changing or being adopted in organization, and particularly in ours, is at 3 levels. One is what's happening inside the organizations in the functions which are making use of technology to make themselves either more efficient or reliable or superior. In fashion industry, it is happening at multiple levels. One is first just the integration of supply chain from design to product development to vendor to delivery to warehousing, etc. All that is coming together in a digital system. I would say manual exercise assisted by some data is now happening with very large scale application of more intelligent automated systems at the back end. So that's true for finance, HR, multiple functions which are getting monitored. But that's efficiency part of the organization. There is a front end which is getting digital, and channel is an important part. E-commerce is a significant part of that, and that's where most companies are sort of investing a lot of their resources. We have built most of our brands are now into Avatar 3 or version 3 of their web experience, defining consumer journey, creating experiences. We still keep falling short of where the consumer, because his expectation comes from the best in this world. So if Amazon has set a standard of delivery or some other sort of supplier has created a consumer experience on UI UX, every organization, especially consumer facing ones, is trying to catch up with that, and that's almost a never ending race. So I would say there again we are made progress, but a lot more needs to be done. We also recognize that perhaps this journey is going to be linear and incremental and perpetual and continuous. We also need to find some discontinuous path. So as a company, therefore, we have started a new business. We have actually created a 100% subsidiary, which is investing in digital first brands in fashion itself. And the idea there is that much of this journey for our business, while we might spend too much time and energy in catching up to pure digitally native consumers. And therefore, we have decided to actually, in some ways, partner the entrepreneurs who are being born in the new world. Their go-to-market strategies are different. Their consumer engagement is different. Their marketing is built around social media, virality, content, engagement. Their basic nature is more driven by data-driven decision-making. So basically, digitally born, digitally first, digitally native companies. It would be hard for us to totally make that journey ourselves. So we have taken a third path, which is investing in these companies and therefore hopefully learning through imbibing from them as well as helping them grow and moving the organization as a whole into the new space.
So, what is the way forward you see for brands originating from India? When can we see an Indian fashion brand actually competing in the global space? Titan tried a few decades ago with, at best, one would say, limited success. So, when do we see that?
So, I think Indian influence and confidence in things Indian is not just an Indian phenomena. If you look at globally also, while sometimes all of us jumped at these small green shoots and start to look at them as big trees, but clearly there is an undeniable respect for the country, its culture, its art, its history, and everything else. So truly India original brands, which are not just manufactured in India, but the idea is Indian. And that's really where we believe the Indian wear has the opportunity to build the next generation of brands which can travel abroad if Indian wear becomes desirable, not just amongst Indians, but other people abroad. We have started this journey. Many of our designer brands, whether it's Masaba, Shantanu Nikhil, Tarun Tailani, or Sabyasachi, have a fair bit of their business coming from consumers abroad. I would say a large part of them were Indians living abroad. Yes. But over a period of time, we are seeing that even as we are traveling, we opened a first Sabyasachi store in New York earlier this year. It's 2 months back. The evidence is quite encouraging to sort of give us greater belief that the idea is not just restricted to diaspora of Indian origin or South Asian origin, but many other people are actually inspired by the Eastern influence that the brand carries. We are very hopeful and very optimistic about that trend to grow stronger. When would that become a wave? Perhaps 10 years later, but I think that's the journey on the first few steps we've already started to take.
So how do you think, obviously, today you're the managing director of the organization, but if we go back to your journey over the last 30 years, how do you think you have evolved as a manager?
I think many sort of steps in the journey, like any professional manager would have. I think the richness of it all started to come together in the second half of my career when I came back as the president of the division at Madura Garments about 15 years back. And that's when, it dawns one day that the buck actually stops at you. Till then, there is always somebody else you look. It doesn't matter. Even at that stage, there are people above, but they're further away. There are a lot more things which end just with you. And therefore, this real sense of leadership when you take actions, take decisions, and the accountability totally lies with you actually starts to happen at that phase. I was fortunate growing in a fast-growing environment in an industry which is dynamically changing, and an organization which is sort of leader in its segment over a period of time. Also, having worked with the chairman of the group, having seen multiple industries, which as a part of his office, I got to see telecom, cement, metals, financial services. I got a very wide and diverse perspective. Many things when you are in a narrow function or a singular industry, you don't appreciate as well as when you've seen it happen across multiple industries. I think a lot of my maturity and leadership confidence came from having seen big leaders, top leaders, interacted with them, seeing them interact with their industries, the commonalities and differences across businesses depending on size, geography, industry types. And that sort of gave me the confidence to create my own path, build my own leadership style by picking up things that you sort of tended to either admire or like or more like you. And that's what has shaped a lot of my leadership journey through these influences.
You also talked about this vantage position which you had. And that got me thinking. You're part of a group which primarily is much more into the industrial space than it's in the consumer space. And then you have fashion. There's a group culture, and then your organization also needs to have a bit of difference given the nature of its business. First of all, how do you manage that dichotomy?
So I think one of the real assets of the group, and it has been, to my mind, very foundational to the way we have managed to build a group of this kind with this diversity. Look, diversity is not only across industries, diversity is across geographies. We are present in 36 countries. We have large operations in Western world, whether it's in North America or Europe. So as a group, our ability to assimilate and being a conglomerate of a diversified nature may have been accident initially, but now it's a choice. It's a significant strength that group has built over a period of time. So to that extent, in retrospect, I don't think it is surprising that the group managed to assimilate a business which was very different from it when it started. Having said that, the group had a lot of presence in other parts of textile value chain. We multiple fabric mills. We had presence at other textile sectors. So there is a reasonable degree of value chain understanding that existed. But clearly, I think as we have seen subsequently over the years, whether it's financial services, telecom, fashion, and many new businesses that we are now getting into, the group's ability to move between large industrial manufacturing-led business to consumer-facing business to now even some new technology businesses is something that as a group we are able to do a lot well.
Ashish, last question for the day, and let me ask you a personal one. What quirks of yours your direct reportees fear the most?
I'm not sure if they fear me at all or any part of me. Quirks, I'm sure, like all of us, I'm sure I have some, but
tell us some of those.
Look, most people who have worked with me have worked for a long period of time. Of my direct reportees, I think other than 2 out of 12, 14 people, most of them have seen me over 2 decades. They've seen my growth from a middle manager to a senior manager to the leader of this function over a period of time. They obviously like some part of it to have stayed along, and I'm sure there are things that they may be able to tell you a lot more about what they don't like.
That was a good dodge. But on that note, we'll call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely having you over here.
Thank you.